Right, guys, we're back with another Fantasy Fellowship fandom discussion. We're discussing Game of Thrones as per the last episode. This time we're going to be discussing the books. I'm once again joined by my fellow guests from the last video. And this time we're going to get into the future of the books and how they differ from the TV show, so to speak, and what could potentially happen if we do eventually get those books. So we'll start off with obviously talking about Winds of Winter, which is the book due to come out next. Tom, do you have any thoughts on how that could potentially go?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts. Where would you like to start, though? I think the Fagon is probably the biggest thing that we could get into.
That's the big one, I think, definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to start there, or do you want to start somewhere else and then lead into that?
I think Fagon is the big meat of what is going to happen in the books. Is very different to the show.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what Fagon is, in books 4 and 5, because for those who don't know, books 4 and 5 are like concurrent. George Martin split them into 2 different books. So half the characters are in one book, half the characters in the other. So they happen at the same time. But during books 4 and 5, Tyrion leaves King's Landing after his trial, and then he murdered Tywin, and he went over to Essos, and he stayed with Magister Illyrio Mopatis, who people who've watched the show will remember that he was the guy that Daenerys lived with right at the start. He gave her dragon eggs, and Tyrion stays with him for a bit, and then he goes south with a mummers group, and mummers are like actors, traveling actors, and he realizes through his journey with them that they're not quite who they seem to be. So there's a character called Young Griff, and then there's a character called Griff. And it turns out that Young Griff is this character who Varys claims that he swapped out. So when the sack of King's Landing happened back, when Robert took the throne and became king, and the Mad King lost his throne, his grandson, who is Rhaegar's son Aegon, was murdered by the Mountain. And so this guy Aegon was only about like 3 months old or something at the time, and he's actually Jon's older brother. Now that we found out that Jon is in fact Rhaegar and Lyanna's son. And so Varys claims that he took baby Aegon, switched him out with a random lowborn child from Pisswater Bend, and that the Pisswater Boy was in fact, as they call him, the Pisswater Boy was the stand-in who was actually killed by the Mountain instead of Aegon. So now Young Griff, who dyes his hair blue to hide his Valyrian characteristics, is claiming to actually be Aegon. And the big implication here is that he would actually be ahead of Daenerys in the line of succession because he was her older brother's son. So now in the show, in the book, Young Griff, who is now calling himself Aegon, is launching an invasion of Westeros, and he's doing quite well where the books are up currently. He's just reached Westeros. He's just taken Storm's Landing, Storm's End, and he's set his sights on King's Landing, and that's where the book's up to at the moment. That's actually from a pre-release chapter of Winds of Winter, and the theory is that Aegon is actually a fake. So, do you have anything you want to add there, Nessa or Damian?
Nessa, do you have anything to add? I'll add my my thoughts.
I really haven't thought about Aegon. Is he fake or not? It's just like I'm not really interested in him. It's an interesting story, but I'm kind of wondering, why are you here now? So what's behind this? I'm not really interested. Is he fake or not. I'm just wondering what's hiding. Like, why are we so focused on this story, or why are we supposed to be focused on him? So what's behind him that we're supposed to be looking at? Kind of that's what I'm focused. Is he fake or not?
Yeah. I'm going to go with, I do believe he's fake, and I believe that's going to play into. I do believe he's got Targaryen blood, but I don't believe he's an actual Targaryen. I believe he's one of the Blackfires, which are an offshoot of the Targaryens back way in the day.
Give me a explanation. I think that the context of the Blackfires is quite important to this discussion.
Definitely, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Blackfires back when so Aegon the Fourth is known as Aegon the Unworthy, and he was actually, as we discussed before with Brendan Rivers, who is Bloodraven, who is the Three-Eyed Raven. His father was Aegon the Fourth, Aegon the Unworthy, and Aegon had a legitimate son, but he kind of despised his son and his wife, and he had a lot of mistresses. So he had a lot of bastards by his various mistresses. And basically the short version of a very long story is that he had one legitimate son, but he didn't like him. He favored the eldest of his bastards. He gave him the ancestral Targaryen sword, the sword that Aegon the Conqueror had, which was called Blackfire. And just before Aegon the Fourth, the king, died, he legitimized his bastard. And basically there was a whole heap of wars and rebellions after this where his son, the bastard son, I think his name was Daemon? I think it was Daemon, yeah. He's named after Daemon from House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And so there was the first Blackfire rebellion. So he took the name Blackfire, instead of, because his last name was formerly Rivers because he was a bastard, but he took the last name Blackfire because of the name of the ancestral sword. And he had a rebellion. He ended up losing the rebellion because Brendan killed him on a battlefield. He shot him full of arrows, and then there was 4 more subsequent Blackfire rebellions afterwards. And the fan theory goes that now the invasion of Young Griff or Aegon is actually the 6th Blackfire rebellion, because the first 5 they tried to win just by martial, in a war, and that didn't work out for them. And now they're trying to do it by guile and trying to pretend that he is a Targaryen rather than a Blackfire pretender.
Yeah, that's a great little recap there for the guys, obviously, in the chat at the moment that wouldn't know about that. And obviously
it's really interesting.
But yeah, I am definitely in the camp that he's a Blackfire. I don't believe he's a legit Targaryen. And I think that's what's going to play in Daenerys eventually going mad and burning King's Landing and going insane. It's because ever since the first book, Viserys, her brother, has said to Daenerys since she was young that the common people and the people of Westeros, they toast in secret to the Targaryens coming to power again. So he's filled her head with all this belief that eventually she's going to come to power, or he's going to come to power, rather, at the time. But later on, her, as we know. And the people will rejoice when she comes over to take the throne. So she's had that built up in her head. So this entire time, she's off in a foreign country to Westeros. She's in Essos, and she doesn't have the backing of the people in Westeros, because they, apart from Robert and his small council, they don't know she exists. So she's off. She's getting a Dothraki army. She's getting a slave army. She's getting an unsullied eunuch army. And she's got her dragons. And meanwhile, fake Aegon is coming over. He's got the backing of Dawn, as we see in the books. He's got the backing of Highgarden and the Reach, as we see in the book. He's got the backing of the Stormlands.
The Golden Company as well.
Yeah, and the Golden Company, which is the biggest army in A Song of Ice and Fire Wales. And so he's going to come over, and as Barry said, he's been raised to be the perfect king. He's compassionate, he's intelligent, he cares about the common people. So he's been raised in that way. And so my idea is he's going to come over, he's going to take King's Landing from Cersei. We're not going to really see Cersei after that, as we have done in the show. Cersei's going to sort of be deposed from that moment in the books. Aegon is going to take over King's Landing. He's going to have the backing of all these different lords and ladies of Westeros. The common people are going to see him as the person who's saved them from Cersei, because as we know in the books, the common people are suffering at the hands of Cersei because she's too busy focused on fighting the wars, and the peasants and the common people are suffering because of it. So he's going to come over, he's going to stop the war, he's going to gain the throne, he's going to make all the common people, love him. And then eventually Daenerys is going to come over. She's going to have her foreign army of Dothraki, who are known to be allegedly rapists and murderers. She's going to have her slave army, and people are going to look at that like, we don't want you. We've got this amazing king who cares for us, who's got the backing of all the lords of Westeros. We don't want you with your slave army and your army of foreigners coming over and killing our people. And she's going,
like, people are obviously very justifiably scared of dragons. They're kind of like a weapon of mass destruction. So they'd rather someone who didn't have the ability to just kill them anytime they want, as he did in season 8.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to be seen as she's somehow going to reveal that he's not a real Targaryen, and the people of the Westeros will still be like, so, he's a good king. We don't care. We would rather him than you. And I think something's going to click in her head at that point, that she's going to snap, and that's when she's going to start burning everything alive, because she's like, fuck this. I've spent my whole life going for this, and you don't want me. I've been told in my life that you want me as your queen, and in my mind, I'm the rightful ruler. But you found out this guy is a fake Targaryen, but you still want him as your ruler compared to me. And I think that's going to be, and I think that's the most egregious omission from the TV show for me, is that he was cut, because I think he is essential to what will eventually become Daenerys' end goal as a character.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, I think that's also going to be the cause of her madness, and that I think she's just grown up, like, ingrained in her mind that, like, this is her birthright, and that she's not only entitled to the throne, but entitled to the love of the small folk, and she's going to be denied both. And I really think that that's what's going to make her snap.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I don't really remember when I read the books. It was a while ago, but Daenerys was more sort of, she was taught that her brother would inherit the throne, and she was just, going to marry him and bear his children because that's tradition, and that she wasn't really important in that regard for the throne. And later, when, her brother dies and she becomes the only surviving legitimate Targaryen, it's only then that she starts seeing herself as, okay, I could be queen. But in the end, I don't think Daenerys will be queen, not because she will be mad or become mad or anything. It's just like in the House of the Dragons show, when the character of Rhaenys Targaryen says that the lords of the Seven Kingdoms would rather see the kingdom burn than to have a woman on the throne. It's just pure misogyny.
That's a great shout there.
Because I think that was that was more of a show simplification in House of the Dragon than it was in the books. And obviously we're talking about the books with Daenerys, so I think that, like, it's going to follow the books more than it will the House of the Dragon show. So, like, in the Fire and Blood, the book that House of the Dragon is based off of, the misogyny aspect was definitely a factor, but it was a very much lesser factor than it was in the show. The show, they just simplified motives. That was like probably the biggest changes, that they just changed every character's motives for everything that they were doing. But the main thing was that in the book, most of the reason why, for example, Rhaenys didn't become queen instead of Viserys becoming king was not because of misogyny, but because of other factors, like other people supported one party over another because they saw political gain for it themselves. So the whole like thing behind the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is that everyone is out to just benefit themselves. So if they see any form of benefit, they'll go for it. So they supported Viserys, for example, and then they're supporting Aegon later, where the show is just getting up to, more so because they see a benefit to themselves rather than purely sexism.
Yeah, because they see both Viserys and Aegon as easier to manipulate. And when you think about it, Rhaenys Velaryon, her husband is Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, and he's very powerful and influential, and he's not really easy to manipulate. So it's pretty clear why they did support her claim.
At the time, though, like for Rhaenys in particular, well, she wasn't married to Corlys.
Yeah, she was at the Great Council.
She was a teenager. She was like 12. And the reason was, so there's two I think what you're thinking of is you're thinking of the Great Council, but she was actually passed over in the book before that. And she was passed over. Yeah, she was passed over in favor of Viserys' father. Yeah. And the and that was because he was like a 33-year-old man who'd proven valor instead of so it was favoring either the first son's daughter, which was Rhaenys, or the second son. And the second son was like 33. The daughter was like 12. So they chose a 33-year-old man instead of a 12-year-old girl, basically. So yeah, it wasn't quite as much, and we're definitely segueing here from the original point, but I think it's important to note though that like misogyny was definitely a factor, but it wasn't the prevailing factor in the books.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it will be a huge factor also in Dany's case in the books. I think George could really play on that, like that. Okay, you have dragons, but you're a woman, and we don't want women on the throne. And especially after Cersei.
I guess so, but I think what we were talking about with the whole like Fagon thing is there's just so much like setup and foreshadowing that like I really think that the theory that like Damian was outlining about Daenerys going mad because all the like everyone just preferring Aegon, even though he probably is a fake. I really think that's because there's just so much like setup and foreshadowing that like that's what it has to be. And yeah, for anyone who hasn't read the books, these are all just theories. They're not like everything we've been discussing in the section is definitely not set in stone. It's very much a fan theory, and it's not even confirmed either that Aegon is a fake. There's just evidence though that suggests to fans that he might not be legit because a lot of us believe that he is Illyrio Morpattis' son because there's a lot of lines in the book that says stuff like about how Illyrio says that the Blackfires died out in the male line because in the 5th rebellion, Maelys and Montrose rebelled, but then he was killed by Barristan. And then, so everyone thought that the Blackfires died, but he reveals that they only died in the male line. And then soon after, we find out that he had a wife called Sarah, and we saw a picture of her in a locket, and she has bright blue eyes and silver blonde hair, which are very Targaryen and physical characteristics. And he talks about how he owes a debt of affection, and that the Golden Company, who had always supported the Blackfires throughout the previous rebellions, that the Golden Company have never ever broken a contract, but now they break a contract to help Aegon with his invasion of Westeros. And when Tyrion asks about this, Illyrio explains to him that some contracts are written in ink and others are written in blood. So it really kind of like tells us, and there's some other foreshadowing and hints throughout the text. But yeah, it's all a theory, but it's one that I think has a lot of merit and it has a lot of setup and foreshadowing that I think will come to fruition if the books ever do get completed.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. Going off another really sort of big theory that, at least to me anyway, it seems like pretty much confirmed in the books, but it's never really mentioned in the show. Is we spoke about the Red Viper earlier, Oberyn Martell. In the books that he actually poisoned Tywin, and that's why when Tyrion found him sat on the toilet, that was because of Tywin. And obviously later on, when at Tywin's vigil, repeatedly in the book, and I think they maybe make mention of it in the show as well. I'm not totally sure, but they make mention of how his body stinks, doesn't it, compared to the usual kind of.
So in the show, Jaime's like standing vigil over him and he just can't like bear the stench. But in the book, it actually says that the body was rotting, it had a green tinge and it was leaking fluid.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember that the whole theory is the Red Viper is he's a master of poison, and he's mentioned as a master of poison in the books. And it's one of his sort of weapons of choice, so to speak. And he even poisons his spear when fighting the Mountain in their duel. And as we know, the Viper hates Tywin. He wants Tywin to admit that Tywin gave the Mountain the order to kill Elia and her children. And in the books, Tyrion mentions he finds out that the Viper and Tywin having breakfast with each other, and he mentioned, he makes a mental note to say the Red Viper and Tywin Lannister breaking fast together. That's strange, very strange. It's the last thing I would expect to happen. And obviously, there's little hints throughout Storm of Swords, the third book, towards the end of the book, that why is Oberyn spending all this time with Tywin? He hates him. He knows what Tywin is. He knows what Tywin has done. Why is he playing nice with him? And then obviously, when we don't see this as much in the show, when Jaime frees Tyrion from his cell, they don't actually have an affectionate goodbye that like they do in the show. It's very much, you're the only person to not treat me like I'm a monster. Thank you, brother, for my life. Whereas in the book, Jaime says to Tyrion, "Were you the one to kill my son?" And obviously, we know Tyrion in the book and in the show, Tyrion didn't kill Joffrey, but Tyrion's sort of been driven to madness in that point. So he says, "Yes, I did kill your horrible bastard son. I wish like he did in the trial when he says, I didn't kill Joffrey, but I wish I had." But in the tunnels where Jaime is escaping, he says that I did kill him and I took pleasure in doing it. And Jaime sort of, leaves Tyrion at that point, heartbroken. And Tyrion makes his way to the Tower of the Hand, which is where Tywin lives. And there's a mental note of him saying, "I found Tywin where I knew I would find him, sat on the privy." Why did he know the privy, the toilet? Why did he know that he would find him there? And Tywin's giving off horrible stench the entire time he's on the toilet. And when Tyrion shoots him with the crossbow, Tywin defecates everywhere. Obviously, that doesn't happen in the show. And the iconic ending line of that chapter is, because throughout the book, people say Tywin Lannister is so rich that he shits gold. And when Tyrion shoots Tywin with the crossbow and he's sat on the toilet and he defecates everywhere, it says the end of the chapter is in the end, Tywin Lannister did not, in fact, shit goals. But it's quite telling, isn't it, that Tyrion, he suspected, why is the Red Viper spending all this time with Tywin? And then he smells this horrible, strange, strong smell whilst he's in the Tower of the Hand, and he's on the toilet like he knew Tywin would be. And then obviously in Feast for Crows, when Cersei and Jaime are visiting Tywin's corpse, like you said, Tom, it's a very strong, repugnant smell. So I'm a very big believer in the Tywin, the Red Viper poisoned Tywin, and it's one of them things that you miss out on. Obviously, the books are, for the most part, the show is very faithful to the books, but it's those little things that you miss out on when you don't read the books. So you would never have got that from the show. You never would have got the Viper poisoned Tywin. You never would have got the Viper poisoned the mountain, and it's just little things like that, that just, I think, just make the books like edge that much more.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, I'm totally in favor. I do believe that Oberyn poisoned Tywin. I just wonder if this was his own initiative, or this was something that he and his brother Doran talked about before, and it was agreed upon before Oberyn's actual coming to King's Landing. That's what I want to know.
So I actually, I've got something there, is that, so I'm actually not quite as certain as you two on the theory. I think there's a lot of merit towards it, but there's also a few factors that kind of go against the theory. But just to go straight off what you said there, Nessa, some fans think that part of the reason why he might not have poisoned Tywin was because Doran, Oberyn's brother, had said that he didn't want Tywin to die straight away. He wanted to strip everything that Tywin held dear before killing Tywin. So he was actually disappointed when Tywin died. So I think that's maybe an implication that, at least if Oberyn did poison Tywin, that Doran didn't want him to, or it might even be an implication that Oberyn didn't poison him at all, because Oberyn and Doran worked very closely together. But just before I give some counterpoints, one strong point in favor of that theory is that earlier in the chapters, Pycelle actually mentions a poison that sounds a lot like what the poison that could have been used on Tywin. He mentions a poison called Widow's Blood and says that the poison shuts down a man's bowels until he drowns in his own poisons. And based off all of the information that Damian provided before, I think that is quite strong in favor that this Widow's Blood could be the poison that was given to him. But some counterpoints, though, is that the timeline kind of doesn't work, because Oberyn dies, I think it's a couple of weeks before Tywin does. If it's not weeks, it's definitely days. So it would have to be a very slow acting poison if that was the case. And Tywin was very in good health before his death. So it would have to be an unusual acting poison to be slow acting, and then kind of just have a big impact right before he died. And then the other implication that maybe Oberyn didn't poison him is that it's kind of against Oberyn's nature to murder someone secretly and anonymously, because when he was fighting the Mountain, he was making a massive show of, his whole speech about you raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children. And it kind of would go a little bit against Oberyn's personality, because he really showboats his need for revenge, and doing it so anonymously and secretively to Tywin kind of goes against his nature. So that's why I'm a little bit more on the fence on this theory than perhaps the Fagon theory, which I 100% believe.
Yeah, I can see that, Tom. That's you've made some pretty convincing arguments there. So yeah, I can definitely see it from your point of view with that. One other sort of book theory or book difference in terms of the future of the books and possibly the show that I would like to get into is Euron Greyjoy and how he differs from the book, how he differs from the show.
Yep.
That is possibly the most major character deviation for me.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah,
it's pretty substantial how different the characters are. So for those of you who don't know, obviously we know that Euron is a Greyjoy, he's Theon's uncle. In the book, well, sorry, start for the show. In the show, Euron's he's a Jack Sparrow ripoff, but a bit more crude. He's just basically just sort of pirate, travels the seas, rape, pillage, all that sort of thing. Whereas in the books, he's a lot more sinister. He's a lot darker. There's a lot more mystery attached to him. So one of the theories that he looks very different. His appearance is vastly different in the books as well.
he has a badass eye patch, which I'm kind of like sad they didn't put in the show.
Yeah, and he has blue lips, which means he experiments with warlock magic as well.
Yeah, there's actually like a brief passage about how he spent time with the warlocks in Karth, who Daenerys, obviously has a run-in with when they steal her dragons.
Yeah, definitely. And he knows a lot about Daenerys in the books, doesn't he? He has nothing to do with Daenerys in the show.
Yeah,
but books,
I think I know what theory you're going with here, but I'll let you continue with that.
Well, I'm going to get into that at some point. Whether that is actually a thing or not remains to be seen. But I do think no matter what, in the books, Euron's story is tied to Daenerys somehow. He knows a lot about Daenerys in the books. I mean, a hell of a lot. And he obviously, when we meet him in the books, he has, depends when we meet him in the books. That's one of the theories. Is that he has access to a horn that can control dragons. And he's very adamant that if he sends his brother Victarion, who for some reason isn't a character in the show, I don't understand why he wasn't, because he's fantastic in the books.
Yeah, I really like Victarion and Euron as well. Like, I think I like book Euron.
I love book Euron
infinitely more than show Euron.
And he's very adamant that if he sends Victarion to Meereen to collect Daenerys for him, that Daenerys will marry him. He's adamant that Daenerys will fall for him, that Daenerys will have no choice but to marry him. He's very sure of that. And he seems to have agents everywhere. Euron, like he's attacking Old Town. He seems to be, doing stuff everywhere. And one of the theories is that he sailed to the Doom of Valyria, which is obviously the ancestral homeland of the Targaryens, and people that sail to Valyria are said to never return, but obviously Euron's returned somehow. And basically what I'm trying to get at is, I'll get into another theory later on, but my main idea is that we've got the Night King in the show, who is the leader of the White Walkers / others. I believe that in the books that Euron is going to be the person that brings the White Walkers over the wall. I think that, as we saw in the show with the Night King getting a dragon and burning the wall down, I think that Euron is going to get one of Daenerys' dragons with the horn, and I think he's going to bring down the wall. I think that he's probably going to be the figureheads of the White Walkers, to give them more of a human sort of character to relate to. Because obviously he's been all over. He's researched different dark arts, and he's obviously, like you said, Tom. He's spent time with the warlocks of Quel'The, and there's whispers of north of there's dead things in the water as well, dead things swimming in the water up north, and I think that maybe that's related to Euron somehow. And I think Euron is the catalyst that brings the wall down, and I think he's there to give sort of a more human look at the White Walkers / others. But also I think that with Euron as well, I don't know if any of you guys will remember this character from Sarah Louise, there's Dario Naharis. He's the mercenary who spends a lot of time with Daenerys, and he's sleeping with her at one point as well.
Yeah, I can't stand him.
Yeah. So basically,
Really, I loved Dario.
I don't know. He's on the fence about him, but like Dario, he was introduced in the show.
Wait, he was one played by two different actors, yeah?
He was.
Yeah.
That's sort of what at the time made me think that. Basically, the theory is that Euron Greyjoy is Dario, and there's a lot of evidence in the books to suggest it, and there's a lot of evidence in the show to suggest it, but in the show ultimately it wasn't a thing. So basically, obviously they changed actors with Dario over the course of season 4 and season 5 onwards, and so Dario. In the show, the later actor, he looks very much like how Euron is described to look in the books, but apart from the eye patch and the blue lips. And in the books, there's a lot of timelines that add up here. Dario is in the book when Daenerys meets Dario. He's got dyed blue hair and a dyed blue beard, and she often remarks
blue beard and a golden tooth. His
golden tooth, yeah. I don't know if I'm getting the books and the show confused here, but I know his mercenary company, it's got 2 different names in the book and the show, but in one of them it's called the Second Sons. And
in the show it's the Second Sons, because in the book there's a couple different, there's 2 or 3 mercenary companies. So in the book, Second Sons is run by a different guy. But in the book, it's the Stormcrows.
Stormcrows, that's it. And often in the books, Euron is just described as the Crow's Eye, isn't he? And I've
it's like
there's at one point
he's actually called the Crow's Eye more often than he's called Euron.
Yeah, and he even says at the Kingsmoot at one point, I believe he says, "I'm of the storm," doesn't he, or something similar to that?
Yeah, he does.
And basically, throughout the first few books, that the people of the Iron Islands are wondering where the hell's Euron gone. In that time, Dario is off helping Daenerys out over on the other continent, Essos. And then once the timelines start to add up, Daenerys asked Dario to take his army to go to Yunkai, I believe. And in that time that he goes to Yunkai, the other book, Feast for Crows, is happening, and Euron shows back up on the Iron Islands, and he has a horn with him that can control dragons, and he knows a lot about Daenerys. And Dario and Euron have slept with each other at this point, and Euron is adamant that Daenerys will marry him, that he knows her really well, and that he can get her to marry him. And just the timelines just add up so well with that. Obviously, it didn't show that it didn't amount to anything, but in the books, like, I don't know, Tom, what's your thoughts on it? Because I know you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so there's other fans who have literally, like, very, very, very meticulously aligned the timeline, and the voyage, because they're very, very far apart geographically, that would take several months between Marine, where Dario is, and the Iron Islands, where Euron is. Without taking the voyage into consideration, the timelines definitely align. The one issue is the voyage, but there is a lot of foreshadowing and setup that because he has, like, in the books, Euron on his ship has some warlocks who can kind of, like, aid in faster travel.
Yeah.
So assuming that he can sail, like, abnormally fast because of this magic, the timelines do align. So it's definitely, like, possible, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's and obviously with the recast in the show, I thought, right, they've recast the actor, but the guy that they've recast him with looks exactly like how Euron is supposed to be in the books. So I thought, well, is this actually going to be a thing now? And whether it is in the books or not, I don't know now. I feel like if it was, they would have done it in the show, which is a shame because it's quite a cool theory. But
yeah, there's a whole heap of like very, very minor, subtle details that very much like make you believe that it is a thing, because I think this is one of the theories where fans are like definitely of two minds. There's other theories where fans wholeheartedly believe, and there's others that they're not very much in favor with. But this is one that I think fans have gone back and forth for a long time, because there's just so much setup. There is some like things that go against the theory that kind of like make it less of a possibility, but there's just so much setup that like it either has to be intentional and be true, or like a bit of a misdirection on George's part.
Yeah, because like you said, there is so much set up there that has to amount to something, whether he's Dario or not, or whether it's a misdirection to some sort of other character or some sort of other event that has to amount to something, because there's been too much set up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because what you said earlier about how he you think that he's going to like be the figurehead of the White Walkers, and that he's going to like bring down the wall. Yeah, that's something I hadn't actually thought about. So that's a bit of an interesting, different take.
Yeah,
I think either like take the dragon, or or there is a lot of like foreshadowing in the books about the Horn of Garamond, which is like just very briefly, it's a mythical horn that apparently if you blow it, the wall collapses, and that's what Mance Rayder has been like looking for in the books throughout his whole time. That's like his main motive. So I thought it was either going to be that, or Euron would take the dragon, not that he would like help the Night King get south of the wall. But yeah, it's a cool theory.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for episode 2 of the Game of Thrones fandom discussion, where we were talking about series and books. We would just like to point out we also have a community Discord. You can find more information about that on our Instagram, which is at fantasy_fellowship. On Twitter, we are at fanfellowship. We also have a website, which is www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. If you did enjoy this fandom discussion episode, be sure to hit like, and you can catch the next episode when you subscribe to our channel. The next episode, we're going to be talking about the future of the series and the spin-off. So we're going to be talking about House of the Dragon and the new Jon Snow TV show that's going to be coming out. Thank you so much to everyone that joined us, and we'll see you in the next one.